Hello pupils, welcome to our online class on science for today. And our topic for today is friction. Under this topic, we'll be looking at the definition of friction. We'll also try to know the strength of friction. We'll look at the effects of friction, which can be classified into two, the useful effects and the harmful effects. And finally, we'll also look at ways we can reduce friction. Before we go into the topic of today, I want us to make a recap on our last topic for last term. Our last topic for last term was on force, and we defined force as a push or a pull on an object which can change the position or shape of the object. And we classify force into two types. We said we have the contact force and the field force. For that of the contact force, we said the contact force is a type of force that exists when two bodies are in contact. Example of a contact force is a friction, the topic we are going to be discussing today. For that of the field force, we said the field force is a force which does not require direct contact between the bodies that is receiving the force. Example of a field force is the force of gravity and electromagnetic force. Now, having said that, I believe I've been able to lay a foundation on our topic for today. So let's go over to the definition of friction. Friction is a type of contact force that stops things from moving or sliding easily when two surfaces are in contact. So if you have two bodies coming in contact, friction is a force that acts at the surfaces of these two bodies in contact. We're going to be looking at the everyday examples of friction. I believe these everyday examples of friction should be able to help us to understand what friction is. The first example of friction we'll be looking at today is when we rub our hands together. I would like us to demonstrate this by rubbing our hands together. When you rub your hands together, your right palm and your left palm comes in contact. Their surfaces comes in contact. And the force that acts between the two surfaces when you are rubbing them together is known as friction. Friction as a force tends to oppose the motion or the movement of another body over the other. So your right hand is moving over your left hand. The force that tries to stop your right hand from moving over your left hand and your left hand from moving over your right hand is known as friction. So when you pull and you push over, friction acts between the two surfaces in contact. Let's consider another example. Another example of everyday friction is a friction that acts between the sole of our feet and the ground. This friction tends to help us to move. You can see on my slide, I have a man and the sole of his shoe. The man is walking. Between the surface of the shoe and the surface of the ground, friction is acting. Let's also look at another example of friction. Another example of friction is when we push an object over the ground. You discover that when you try to pull or to push an object over the ground, you experience little or more difficulty depending on the size of the object. Now, what opposes your ability to push the object over the ground is known as friction. Okay, now we've talked about the examples of friction, so let's go over to the strength of the force of friction. Friction as a contact force. The strength of friction depends on three factors. And these factors are, number one, we have how hard the surfaces push together against themselves. Depending on the strength of the push or the pull, the strength of friction also increases. If the force you use in pushing or pulling one surface over the other is large, the force of friction also increases. Secondly, the size of the contact area between the surfaces. The lesser this contact area, the lesser the strength of friction. But the larger, or let me say the smaller the surface area or the contact area of the two bodies, the smaller the contact area, the lesser the strength of friction. The larger the contact area, the larger the strength of friction. Let me use this as an example. If you're sliding, or if you are trying to slide your rule, that's your ruler, over the surface of your desk, you discover that you are going to need little energy to slide it. But if you try to slide your bookshelf over the surface of the ground, you discover that you need more force. So the force of friction increases when the surface area is large and decreases when the surface area is small. The last factor we're going to be considering is the types of surfaces involved. The strength of friction is lesser in smooth surfaces, and it increased in rough surfaces. So when the surface is smooth, frictional force tends to be less. But when the surface is rough, frictional force tends to increase. A very good example is when we are rubbing our cream. When you apply your cream in your palm, you discover that the movement between the palm, when you rub them together, it's smooth. It goes faster. But when there is no cream in your palm and your palms are dry, when you rub them together, discover that you tend to have difficulties rubbing them. Now let's go over to the effects of friction. For today, we'll be looking at the useful effect and the harmful effect. So let's look at the useful effect of friction. Friction prevents cars, the wheels of cars, from slipping when moving on a tired road. If you look at the image I have on my slide, you're going to discover that there's an arrow. The blue arrow is telling us the direction of the force of friction. So there's friction between the wheel of a car and the surface of the ground. So when this car is moving, the force of friction prevents the car from slipping. Another effect of friction, useful effect, is it enables us to write on our papers. So the friction acts between the surface, the tip of the pencil or your pen, and the surface of the paper. We also have the wheel of the bike. In terms of brake, friction also assists us with that. Let's go over to the harmful effect of friction. As it has useful effect, it also has harmful effect. The harmful effect of friction is it causes tears and wears in our shoes, in our car tires, also in engines. So you can see there's a shoe on my slide, and there's also a tire on my slide as well. So friction causes tears and wears. How can we reduce friction? Because of its harmful effects, how can we reduce it? The first way we can reduce friction is by applying lubricant. Example of the lubricant is our grease and our oil. For those of us that if you have this smaller gen in your house, you discover that before you on the gen, not just the gen, even your car, you have to put your grease. Now the grease goes into the engine where we have more friction occurring, and it enables the engine to slide or move over each other. Another way we can reduce friction is by the use of ball bearings or rulers. You can see the ball bearings there. It enables the two surfaces in contact to move smoothly. In other words, it reduces friction. Okay, finally, we can wear our flip-flop slippers. Flip-flop slippers are a type of sandals that are being built, and the surface of these sandals, it's rough. So when the surfaces are rough, it enables the sandals to have a perfect grip on the ground. In other words, it reduces friction. We have come to the end of our class for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Remember all we've said. I would like to do this some other time with you. Bye for now.